today, everyone's been told what they can't do. What we haven't been doing is telling them what they can, empowering them with the success that they may have right now, and trying to compound effect over those successes to broaden out those successes across the board.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Our guest today is a sports performance specialist and injury prevention expert that has coached some of the world's most elite athletes, including multiple Olympic gold medalists, NFL and MLB All-Stars, and professional athletes from 11 different sports. He has created pain-free programs used by over 25,000 athletes and is the founder of the Pain-Free Performance Specialist certification. In this week's episode, we cover a number of topics, including how to put together a workout program that allows you to train longer, harder, and recover faster. One of the most important exercises you should be doing, but probably aren't, for improving strength and longevity. And why is it important to have strong and sexy glutes, and how do you get them? So please welcome Dr. John Rusin to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast.
John, thank you so much for joining us today. As I said just before we started, I was chatting to my friend who introduced us, Mr. Pete Holman, and on the way back from an event last night in LA, I was listening to one of the podcasts you did, and Pete had developed a product which we're going to be launching, and he was telling me a lot about these sort of loaded carries and how important it was, and I listened to you talking about an NSCA study that you did specifically around that. So I just wanted to, as a start off, if you could tell us a little bit about what that is and why you decided to do that.
Man, you're digging these out of the grave, because I believe that study was done in 2016 and it was published in 2017. And it was literally just looking at recommendations for loaded carry capacity for different demographics of population. So we're actually able to establish 3 basic recommendations. And these are general recommendations just to keep in mind. The first one was a post rehabilitation. So after any sort of pain, injury, dysfunction that led you into a rehabilitation setting, how much should you be able to carry for 30 seconds? And then secondary to that was general fitness population for health and also longevity. How much you should be able to carry for 30 seconds. And then finally, the one that gained all of the notoriety was for elite sports performance. People that get paid money to play their sport. What is their relative strength and how much should they be able to carry? And very simply put, for post-rehab, we should be able to carry 50% of our body weight for 30 seconds. For the general fitness population, we should be able to carry 100% of our body weight for 30 seconds. Relatively to me, I'm a 200-pound male. For post-rehab, that means I have a 50-pound dumbbell and a 50-pound dumbbell. If it's a general fitness, it's a 100-pound dumbbell and a 100-pound dumbbell for 30 seconds. And then the one that everyone really obsesses about is elite sports performance. I'm carrying a 200-pound dumbbell in my right hand, 200-pound dumbbell in my left. If you're thinking, man, we don't have 200-pound dumbbells laying around, especially for people that are more than 200 pounds body weight, we tested this out on a trap bar. So it was a deadlift plus carry off of a high handle. And these were really nice metrics just to get the ball rolling, but they are really predicated on relative strength capacity and full body recruitment, because there is a lot that has to do with the shoulders, the hips, the core, working simultaneously as a pillar complex together in order to locomote the body through space. And that's a huge skill when it comes to rehab, performance, and just being generally fit.
Right. So since you did that study then, has anything further been, I suppose, discovered, or is there any other things that you've learned specifically around that? It's something, like I say, I didn't realize it was that old of a study, well, in relative terms, I guess. But I certainly more recently, there's a lot of people actually, talking about that type of training now. So, as I said, is there anything since then that has materialized since, you decided to actually do that?
Yeah, fitness and sports performance industry, it's an interesting pendulum swing left and right. One thing is amazing, and then 10 years later, it's absolute shit. I wouldn't say that about loaded carries, but what I would say, it was glorified in such a way, maybe 5, 6 years ago, that people were overdoing it. It was like, hey, let's just loaded carry every session. Let's do it for warm-ups. Let's do it for finishers. Hell, on off days, it's a recovery mechanism because it's a concentric only training technique. And people were overdoing it with the loaded carries. So I know with my programming, within my coaches and my clients, we really just try to maybe have 1, maybe 2 times a week of frequency, when in the past, maybe it was up to 3 to 4 times a week of frequency. And it's just distributing the foundational movement patterns in such a way that we're not overemphasizing one while neglecting another. Because when it comes to training the human movement system and optimizing the human movement system, we do have to make sure that we gain and maintain across the entire spectrum.
Right. So in terms of your journey then, like how did you establish yourself as an expert in this sort of pain-free performance area? You know, and also build pretty significant, I believe from what I understand, you know, you've got over 50,000 clients now that you're working sort of both online and face-to-face. So, you know, what was that journey like, and how did you, I guess, get to where you are today?
Well, I coached my first athlete 16 years ago in Buffalo, New York, born, raised, and schooled for 10 years. And at that point in time, I was focused on sports performance. So the first decade of my career was in high performance sports. So I was in the collegiate setting. Early on, I coached in high school. And then that led to me to professional and Olympic level sport for about 3 to 4 years. That burned me out, that broke me down, and that led me to a paradigm shift in my thought process of what I wanted to do in my career, the impact that I could have on people, and more so the deep influential impact that somebody could have on a lifestyle from a coaching and a training perspective. So I went cold turkey. About 95% of my clientele from my first 10 years was elite level performers in sport. And then I moved directly into the fitness industry. And now I have 95% of my clientele being people that look, feel, and function their best as a goal set. And that has been a really rewarding shift for me personally, because you know, when you're prepping somebody for an NFL combine or for the upcoming Olympics, you know, it's not hugely awesome all the time. There's a lot that goes into making someone that's already awesome fractionally better. And ultimately, what my job was doing was just making sure that these athletes were healthy enough to just be the absolute beasts that they inherently were naturally. So I look at it as glorified babysitting. Let's make sure that they don't get fat. Let's make sure that they don't get in trouble with the law. And let's make sure that they're healthy enough to just simply go out there and be themselves. There wasn't a huge market impact on their life outside of sport. And for me, in my life, you know, I've seen how physicality can transcend somebody's entire life, make them a better father, a better community member, business owner. It can really change the game for people. And being able to treat my general fitness clientele with the same intensity, but also the same focus and details that I was training my professional athletes. Whoa, okay, now we're talking about something that is the business model that we run today. And I truly believe that nobody is better than anyone else. Just because you make $20 million on the field on Sunday doesn't mean that your body is less important than another. And being able to give people multimodalic programs that were not only smart, but sustainable and get them into habitual exercise and training for a lifetime that adds to their quality of life and also extends their quantity of life. That was something that maybe 5-6 years ago I started focusing in on, that tended to be the thing that really stuck and allowed me to get to the point where I've been able to touch a lot of lives, a lot of clients, and then ultimately launching my certification program that has over 11,000 certified coaches in the last 3 years, all of which have been certified in person.
Wow. So I know you do a lot of virtual training, and I was interested on this. Obviously, the pandemic has probably pushed or forced a lot of people to take their businesses online. As a trainer and coach, what's can remote be almost as good as face to face? And what are some of the challenges that you see with the remote model, as opposed, you know, outside of the obvious? But what are some of the challenges that you've seen? Because you have created a successful business by doing that.
Well, first things first is I do not do virtual training. And I think this is really an interesting topic to tackle first and foremost, because the difference between online training and virtual training is being live in a session. Virtual training is that you sign on to Zoom or FaceTime and you are one-on-one with that client, just as you would be in a gym setting. I've specialized in online training over the last 3 years, which is that I have clients that are indeed remote, and I set up everything that they need to be successful. And all the communication happens in non-real time. So it happens with communication portals, video demonstrations, all of that stuff that happens where I can coach on my time and then they can give feedback and get coached on their time. And that is dubbed the most influential thing in the fitness industry post-COVID. If you're not online training, you're basically a piece of shit, because this is the future of fitness. I couldn't disagree more. I don't believe that there's a huge market for online training today. I don't believe that this is the future of fitness. And I think that there has been so many people, tens of thousands of coaches across America and probably even more abroad, that have jumped too fully into an online space and have had huge failures in it. And now they're selling real estate or insurance as opposed to training their clients in the vocational profession that they were previously in. And I'm in a fortunate situation because, like I mentioned, I have 11,000 certified coaches. And over the last 2 years, we've seen everything. We've seen the good, we've seen the bad, we've seen the fucking ugly things transpire. And today, my best recommendation, this may change in the future, but my best recommendation today in February of 2022 is that in-person is going to be the new future of fitness, because many jumped into online, realized there was a really cloudy, muddied space, and ultimately it is far harder to change lives and get world-class results in terms of health, fitness, and performance over a screen as opposed to a human-human connection.
And I would totally agree with what you've said. I was at an event yesterday, and it was just so nice to actually see people. And there's so much that happens outside of the organized and fixed routine of a sort of digital situation. But from your perspective, then, as I said, why do you think that virtual can't? Why you seem as though you're pretty against that. What is that through some of the experiences that you've had and some of the limitations that you've got by doing training in that particular way?
I am an outlier, and I'll just preface my statements in saying that I've been extraordinarily lucky to have opportunities that have given me notoriety in the industry, that have given me a large clientele and a really big surplus of coaches that come through my methods. And then ultimately 50% of my online training clients are coaches themselves. So this is not the average trainer out there trying to get somebody that's trying to lose 20 pounds, a lay person, into health and fitness. The limitations that I've seen are not necessarily from my own experiences, but the experiences of my coaches within my PPSC network. And many simply struggle to be able to market and to be able to establish long-term clientele so we can make life-changing results in such a way that can not only impact the client's life, but also your business from a means of being able to be stable. The inside look at some of the new technologies that manage online clients, we're only seeing that for every user on some of these third-party technologies, that they have anywhere from 1.3 to 1.7 online clients. That's not paying the bills. And most likely they're not able to justify a rate that is going to be any more than an in-person training session for 1 hour at a time. So it's this big misconception, and something that's been misstrued was that we thought we had to go online, but truly I think that there are opportunities for outliers out there. If you have 5 million people on Instagram, cool, maybe try the online space. Or if you have touch points with tens of thousands of people as I do, maybe that's a good thing. I only got into online because I was out speaking 40 weekends a year for 2.5 straight years when I started doing my courses. And I was flying from country to country, continent to continent, city to city, and I basically lost close to 100% of my in-person clientele. And I'm a coach deep down. So I didn't want to stop coaching, programming, critiquing, and fine tuning clients. I just had to find a different way to do it. But at that point in time, I had been more of a public figure in the industry for maybe 6 or 7 years. People knew who I was because they were reading my bylines on major media outlets in the fitness industry. And I had an opportunity to shift. And I hate the word pivot, but I did pivot.
Yeah, me too.
Pivoted in 2018 before it was the cool thing to do. And I think that provided opportunity. But when hundreds of thousands of personal trainers are pivoting at the same time, it becomes a really tough marketplace to not only get into, but ultimately to try to build a sustainable business off of. And we've seen that mistake made time and time again, to the point where the most successful personal trainers and coaches today, in our post-apocalyptic age of post-COVID, are the ones that really just found avenues to best service their in-person clients in person, and finding any means necessary to get that done, because that was ultimately what made them survive the times, and now, in my opinion, have a thriving factor forward just due to the way the marketplace has changed.
Right. So one of the things I picked up is your focus or interest in this injury resilience and rehabilitation, and I just wondered, was that a personal experience that led you to go down that route, or was it an experience from working with some of your clients, or something different? Was it just an important thing that we should all be really looking at as trainers and coaches?
Yeah, injury resilience and being able to be pain-free for life, it is something that is close to me. And it's something that I've spent my entire life focused on, because I do believe that this is the impetus for having consistency and being able to have a physical practice for life. Um, it sounds cliche, but I was a high end sports performance athlete at one point in time, playing football and playing baseball at a Division I level. I had my injuries, I had my pain, I had my troubles, ultimately led to my own demise, but that's not what really moved the needle for me wanting to focus in on this. To be totally honest, I didn't choose to specialize in injury prevention. It chose me. It tended to be where I could have the biggest impact on my clientele or my athletes. And it tended to be the one that hit closest to home, because little background, my father was a athletic director for 36 years in upstate New York, the Williamsville Central School District. He had 43 schools under his watch, and he did health curriculum, he did athletics, and he was the man when it came to our town. Everyone knew him. And he was an athlete in his entire life, ex-pro baseball player, PhD level education in the health and fitness space. And about 10 years before he ended up passing away, he had a lower back injury. And he went to a physical therapist. And the physical therapist told him that he can never do the things that he loved to do again. At the time, he was running, he was biking, he was playing tennis. He was out there trying to be the man at like 50 something years old. And he was. But all of a sudden, he got this self-fulfilling pain prophecy, and he had his physicality taken away from him in a matter of one session with the wrong person. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I thought, man, this sounds like fucking bullshit. Like, how can you never do all of these things again just because your lower back hurt for 2 weeks? And that was so impactful on his life in a negative way that it ultimately led to him struggling for the remaining years of his life, not only physically, but a little bit mentally as well. Because as you know, as I know, there's something special about being able to exercise. It's a physiological component that can get into your mind as well as your soul. It's not just about the body. And seeing this happened to him, I was working in pro sports, and ultimately I left my job because he ended up passing away. And that was like, man, how am I going to change this for people? I don't want this to happen to anyone else. I also don't want it to happen to me or my family ever again. But how do we change the mindset of this debilitating deactivation model of physicality? I don't want physicians to be telling their patients that they shouldn't exercise anymore because lifting weights is dangerous. I don't want physical therapists to create self-fulfilling pain prophecies and scare the shit out of people to the point where now they're depressed and now they're getting fatter and sicker year after year until their physical demise ends them. How are we going to do this? And this was a shift into, again, general fitness, getting in and trying to just do our homework, hit the check boxes of the things that we know to be good, true, and effective for everyone. And how do we ultimately reestablish a reactivation model after a flare-up, after pain, after an injury that you thought may be catastrophic? Because if I've learned anything in my career, it's that no injury is debilitating for a lifetime. No injury will leave you broken forever. It's just a matter of forward, but a biopsychosocial physical model forward that can empower somebody to do what they were said that they can never do. And that was really the big focus that we are going hard on right now across spectrums of all of my businesses. That's our lead mission.
I think it's a great it's a great thing to talk about and to be looking at. And I suppose as I talk about a lot in my podcast, but as I've got older, injuries is something that I never even thought about up until I was probably late 40s, if I'm honest. You know, warming up and training correctly, it was like, look, my body could just roll it off. And now I'm in my 50s. I'm getting payback in a lot of that stuff. And so I suppose one of the things that interests me, and I heard it on a podcast that you did, and I think this is an interesting subject to get your thoughts on, is you're obviously someone who's really passionate about quality of movement and a particular style of training. And I suppose for younger people who come into, they're trainers and they want to work out, you just have a very different perception of life and an injury in most cases. And you were explaining about the onboarding process of people and how it's really important to sort of, you almost have to teach people to forget some of the things that they've learned before you even start them. So you could have someone that's reasonably advanced, even an athlete, and you've actually got to sort of take them down to a level that they probably don't even think they need to go on. So maybe talk about that for a moment in terms of, what is this onboard process that you recommend people doing? And then secondly, the typical differences between someone that kind of thinks they're quite good in the gym, but is probably sort of on a course to, back injuries, knee injuries as they start getting a little bit older.
Yeah, my perceptions on this and my practice has changed over the years as a natural evolution of any vocational expert would. But we look at a reverse engineering process of basically trying to put somebody's human movement profile back together, reestablishing what a human being should be able to do. Now, the thing about our world today, different than 20 or 30 years ago, is that we're all born with this natural ability to move fluidly, access positions, have mobility, stability alike, and be able to truly display what it is to be physical in multiple different physical characteristics. But somehow we fucked it all up. Our lifestyles are not what they used to be. We are driven on sedentary postures, handheld technologies, and really piss poor positions across the board in chronic states. And knowing that, trying to redistribute and reestablish foundational movement patterns within our clientele is maybe the biggest step forward that most coaches miss out on. And it's not the easiest thing in the world. A hip hinge pattern, for an example, it's been deactivated for 25 years in the average clientele because, hey, they haven't had to use it. We're not out on the farms anymore. We're at our laptops and our cell phones. And trying to re-engage these patterns, it can be tough, but they're also the thing that can move us forward and keep us there for the long term and longevity of our lives. But going through and looking at the squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, carry, and rotational patterns, that is what somebody should be able to do without pain, without restriction, without any notable movement dysfunction. And trying to go in and simply redistribute our quality work over a program's time and trying to rebuild those from the ground up truly in some of the progression pyramids that is a cornerstone of my training systems, that is a long-term solution that is extraordinarily effective. So different than maybe 5 years ago or even 10 years ago for sure, I grew up and I was influenced in such a way that I spent my first session to 2 sessions playing doctor. I have a doctor in front of my name, so I can get away with it. I'm going to screen. I'm going to assess. I'm going to tell everyone what's broken with them and that they need me in order to walk down the stairs the next day. I did that for many years. I truly believe that that model of training and fitness is over. It's over. Nail in the coffin. Because today, everyone's been told what they can't do. What we haven't been doing is telling them what they can, empowering them with the success that they may have right now and trying to compound effect over those successes to broaden out those successes across the board. But ultimately, I see the biggest problem today in our society, not even in the fitness industry, but across our Western society, is that we simply don't exercise enough. I was talking to a colleague yesterday and they said, what's the most effective way for injury prevention or injury risk mitigation? What is the number one technique? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I've read all the research. I'm staying on top of that, coached hundreds, if not thousands of clients in person, now tens of thousands online. I have all these coaches. What is the number one thing to staying healthy? It's simply having a physical practice that you are frequent with across a lifetime or a life spectrum. Exercise will keep you healthier. That's not a great selling point. There's not really too much actionable about that, but that is the first step that a majority of our Western society is missing today. We are simply sedentary when we are made to move. We are made to exercise and we were made to be more physically active, not only in the gym, but across all of the different aspects of our life. And reestablishing consistency with the physical practice, that from a pain and performance perspective, they're both the same. That is how we make that first step in and we get notable results instantaneously because, again, referring back to the biopsychosocial physical aspect of being pain-free and being physical, there's good things that happen when we move our body.
So you mentioned that we don't move enough. So that's a broad statement. I'm going to try and sort of get you to narrow down on that slightly. But it links into another thing that I suppose people who work out fairly regularly fall into. And that's this sort of training hard, this philosophy of when you go into the gym, leave everything on the floor and, there's nothing to come out with. And as I've got to learn some of your stuff, it seems, I don't know whether it's changed because you're definitely a person that keeps evolving, but I'm just wondering whether that, your philosophy, because one of the things I quite, that struck me was quite interesting and I need to consider it in my workouts is this, you're ready to feel great about training every day. So you're training hard enough to get what you want, but you're also having this sort of fast recovery. So the next day you're bouncing around and you're kind of ready to do it again. So in terms of that point where you said we're not moving enough, has some of that got to do with how you put together these programs so that the things that you're doing and the intensity that you're doing allows you to do it a lot more frequently than probably you would do if you just left it all on the gym floor?
Yeah, I think that there is a fine line between, hey, I'm showing up and showing up's great and I'm consistent. I never miss a session, but I just go through the motions and it's all bullshit because I never push myself hard enough to ever elicit a training stimulus for my specific goal. And the other side of the spectrum, you're going to go in like you're storming Normandy on fucking D-Day and it's going to be the last workout you ever do. So you better go hard and heavy. And you're smashing pre-workout and then hammering yourself into the face before every set. there's a fine line between both of those things. But again, our society is de-evolving at such rapid rates over the last 2 years. I mean, thank you, COVID, for a lot of things that have transpired that I never would have thought of happening in my lifetime, but they're here today, is that we need consistency. Yes, consistency is going to be the most effective way in order to get the opportunity to have results long term. But consistency for many people is not enough. We've seen consistent people on Pelotons. We've seen consistent people in group fitness settings, and we've seen consistency fail people. You have to be consistent, but you have to consistently work hard enough to elicit the desired stimulus at hand. When you work hard enough, consistent enough, then ultimately smart enough to recover from what you're doing, that is going to be the triad that keeps pushing you forward decade after decade. And another interesting thing about being able to have the capacity mentally or emotionally to work hard enough to elicit a stimulus is that you have to enjoy what you're doing. Not every workout, not every training method or system is for everyone, and that is totally okay. I do believe that strength training is the fountain of youth. I would love if everyone across our country today started strength training. I think we would be a healthier, happier culture. But from a long-term buy-in perspective, you need to enjoy what you're doing. And there's a lot of options in today's fitness industry. We have almost everything out there. So at this point in time, my best recommendation is finding something that you're interested in, finding something that brings you joy. So when something gets hard doing that physical practice, you're able to have the resilience mentally to push through it and to stay consistent and not fall off. Again, very fortunate to have a lot of data coming through some of our partners like Equinox and Lifetime Fitness. And we see that the pain, injury, and burnout rates of personal training clients, personal training clients paying $100, $200 per session to train with an expert, they're falling off in a matter of 5.5 weeks due to pain, injuries, and burnout. I don't know about you, but you're not going to be putting on muscle. You're not going to be losing fat. You're not going to be learning the Olympic lifts in 5.5 weeks. You're simply not. So being able to jump that barrier, which is about 6 weeks, and make something habitual, that is going to be the key for long-term success. But habits need to be somewhat enjoyable. They can't be torturous. It's by definition. So we need to be able to find something that helps the buy-in factor. And that's one of the biggest reasons that I choose to run a multimodalic training methodology, meaning that we train all the physical characteristics simultaneously. If I'm managing a world-class power lifter, we're still going to be doing strength and hypertrophy work. They're going to be doing conditioning. I'm going to recommend that they do maintenance and walking every single day. And all the lifestyle factors matter as well. We're going to talk about sleep and stress. It's not just about, hey, we're going to run this conjugate method and you're going to get strong as fuck. And then you're going to go and compete. And then you're going to blow out your back the next week picking up your son. That's not what I'm interested in because I've seen it fail clients time and time again. The same thing could be said for any dogmatic approach to health or fitness. We like to have a well-rounded approach. I like to use all of the tools in the toolbox that I have at my disposal so I can introduce new things to people to get them interested, to keep the novelty factor up, but also have the buy-in for doing the work that actually creates results. Because results and fun are on this ever-changing scale. There's an inverse correlation between results and fun. Usually the more fun something is, the worse the results are, vice versa. But how do we have that balancing act? Just fun enough to stay consistent, but just results-based enough to actually get to where we want to go in terms of our long-term destination. And that is something that I manage on a daily basis, but it's going to be different for every type of person. And being able to connect with that person and figure out what they enjoy, what pushes them forward, those deep whys behind the reason that they chose to walk in the doors that day, that will potentiate your success as a coach.
So with this, I was listening to, and that was a question you've just answered for me, this multi-modalic model. So, and I know this is a very difficult question to ask, but for people that are generally, reasonable base level of fitness and they want to optimize their health, they want to have decent body shapes and muscle tone, reasonable amount of, relatively lean. Are there any sort of, I suppose, key rules or maybe not even rules, but sort of guidance in terms of what should and shouldn't a decent program look like? And again, some of the people who listen to this are sort of a very high level, and some of the people are sort of fairly basic. So I wanted to, I guess, give people a takeaway. So if they have been given a program, or if they're thinking about a program, what are some of those kind of key components that they should be thinking about that would make up a pretty decent program for someone with that type of goal?
Yeah, this is great. This is the pain-free performance training model you're asking about. And the way I try to explain it is starting your training session, your dynamic warm-up should be reminiscent of the best physical therapy session you've ever had in your life. 10 minutes of world-class maintenance, mobility, and self-help therapy, making you feel great before you actually get in. From there should be some sort of power element into your program. I don't care if you're 75 years old. I don't care if you have bilateral hip replacements. Power is not powerlifting. It's creating force, and it's doing it quickly. And that's one of the biggest devolving skills that we have in our aging population today. So we should be moving explosively. We should be creating tension or moving fast or twitchy or dynamic. That should be a component of the program. One of the ones that is going to be one of the biggest key players is strength capacity. We call it a key performance indicator lift of every single day that you go in and exercise or train. There should be one exercise or one movement pattern that over time the focus is, maybe I should get stronger here, because a stronger person overall is a more resilient person, all else being equal. From there, we should be working on elements of muscle building. This isn't bodybuilding, this is muscular hypertrophy, trying to increase cross-sectional area of musculature. So again, it can work to extend our quality of life long-term. Nobody ever had too much muscle. That is for damn sure, especially in the populations that I work with. And then finally, we need to have a cardiovascular and conditioning component to our training sessions. The heart's a muscle too. And people go polarizing ends of the spectrum on this one. I don't do any cardio, or, hey, cardio is all I do and I don't know how to do anything else. Just look at the big box commercial gyms. You'll see a ton of people over on the treadmills on the cardio deck. You'll see nobody in the squat rack. So being able to mix and match all of these different types of training protocols into one centralized program that trains muscle, trains strength, trains power, trains mobility, trains maintenance, and then ultimately conditioning. That is going to be the blueprint in which a great program is based off of. And then figuring from there, how do I distribute the right exercises or the right movement patterns to cover all my bases? Because essentially my clients want two things. They want to feel really good. They want to be mentally clear, and they just want to be their best, because it sucks feeling like shit. We've all been there. And then ultimately they want to look good too. Hey, nobody wants to look dumpy. They don't want to look like shit. They want to look like they actually train. That was a problem like 15 years ago in the fitness industry, is that somebody convinced all the personal trainers out there and all the certification bodies that we no longer exercise as personal trainers. We are now physical therapists. And all of a sudden, none of the clients even look like they train, and they were sick of that. You want to be able to be proud of yourself physically, mentally, and across the board. And I think that being able to have something that plays into all of these different characteristics and all these different modalities, there's a fun element to it, but also the results are really, really effective. And that's why I'm on this podcast right now, as results in the relationships that I've built over the years are the things that push you forward more than anything else, more than any marketing or Instagram account could ever.
Are there any basics that you would think in terms of the schedule itself? So daily, weekly, monthly, in terms of time and frequency. I've interviewed a lot of people, and there's always differences, and there's differences for a reason. But one of the things people sort of say to me is, well, how many times a week should I work out? And should I work out in the morning or evening? And in a month, should I sort of have a week off every now and again? So are there some things that you've just, again, generic stuff you found is generally successful in terms of that regularity and frequency?
Yeah, I call it the 7 habits of highly healthy people. And I don't want to misquote myself here, so I'm actually looking it up so I can say it correctly. But the first one is strength training. 2 to 3 days a week of progressive strength training is going to be the cornerstone of that program. 3 to 4 days per week of cardiovascular based training is going to add a lot of benefit for most people. From there, you're looking at trying to move your body mindfully every single hour, no matter where you are. Sleeping is the exception. Don't get up every hour to move while you're sleeping. But being able to stand up from your desk, to reset your postures and get into a different position if you can. Your best posture and your best position is your next position, keeping that in mind. Looking at investing just 10 minutes a day, even if you don't train or exercise structurally that day, 10 minutes a day of just working on maintenance. I like foam rolling. I like stretching. I like getting out and doing a couple corrective exercises that you've been working on. Something to move with this being the focus. Move the needle forward with your recovery and your daily maintenance. And then looking at trying to sleep 8 hours per day, 7.5 if you're really deep diving on the research that has changed in the last 2 months, because humans have evolved that much in the last 2 months. 7.5 to 8 hours is going to be the recommendation. And then finally, one of the most important things is to be able to breathe, meditate, and be mindful for at least 5 minutes per day. And this is really hard for people. People look at it and they're like, man, breathing for 5 minutes? Like, yeah, that's really going to help me. But closing your eyes, being able to be into a parasympathetic positional breath that allows you to centrally down-regulate, man, that is one of the most effective things that I've used for my clients across the board, whether they're athletes or whether they're trying to lose weight. We usually do this right at the tail end of a training session, or we do it before sleeping. And we get down on our backs, we elevate the feet up, we close the eyes, we have a quiet environment, and we try to extend the breath out, usually 6 to 7 seconds on the inhale, 3 to 4 seconds at the top hold, an extended 7 to 8 out on the exhale, and a 3 to 4 hold at the bottom. Doing that for anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes after training, it's literally like you took a supplement that you never thought it existed or worked. Like, it's unbelievable, and it's free. A lot of the things that I did mention here too, it's not any of this high technology stuff. It's not any of the super expensive or sexy things that you're trying to be sold on a Facebook ad. They're things that are free, and they're things that are autonomous. Over the years, I've tried to drive our training systems forward to something that is not dependent on any tool or anything that costs money. We want to be able to be autonomous with our own body and the way that it moves. So being able to have that with your own body, it's a skill for life, and it's a skill that I wish more people had, and that's the mission that we're on.
I think it's a great formula. That's one I'm going to... it helps to have things like that in terms of a general, I don't know what you call it, but just some general pointers of things that you need to build into your day and week. Like from a business perspective, I've got those things, when you work with your team, where yourself, your research and stuff. But from your own body, you've got the basics, but I like the level of detail you went in there, because those are things that you can kind of like plan into your day and allow time and yeah, I suppose get that balance that you need. One of the things that I've seen you talk about on your Instagram page is squatting. It's obviously there's so many benefits around that particular movement, and it's one of the things. This is a bit of a selfish question, really, but for 15 or 20 years, I love squatting. It's always been really important, but I kind of always did the same thing. I started at about 60 kilos, went up to about 140, came down, and as I've got older, I'm paying for that in terms of my back. So, as it's such a great exercise, and I suppose it's one that people probably need to incorporate into their training program, is there a safe way that you can make sure that as you age and you're probably not moving as well, and then you're loading a lot of weight and you're creating these injuries, is there a real safe way that you can actually get into squatting? And even as you do it over time, that some things that you could probably start to make sure everything's working in the same way, so you don't end up creating issues and injuries as you get older.
Yeah, this question came full circle, and it became real life last year, where my PPSC staff, for my birthday, they sent me a toilet, and it went right to my front door, and they dropped off a toilet on my porch. And I was thinking, what in the heck? And it was a comment that I made on Instagram. I was being facetious with it, but it was actually real. And the big thing today is like, oh, people shouldn't bilaterally squat. Bilaterally squatting is how you blow out your back and it's bad for your knees and all this stuff. And I simply said, like, if you plan on lowering your ass to the toilet for the rest of your life with autonomy, meaning that nobody's helping you, you better be able to keep a bilateral squat within your program, and you better be able to train it meaningfully. Does that mean that somebody has to load a barbell on their back, with 200 kilos on it just to man up and get it out of the hole? No. It means that we need to have a bilateral stance with both feet on the ground and being able to go through a range of motion that can help us get strong, not only at the lower body, but across the core and the upper body. Some of the best ways to re-ingrain a squat pattern is to simplify the process. We utilize a couple different tools that really help us reestablish the bottom foundational metrics of that movement pattern itself. I'm a huge proponent of being able to box squatting appropriately and effectively, but box squatting nonetheless. Being able to use anterior front-sided loads, things like goblet squats and modified front squats, that has been a staple in our programming as well. And then being able to have the capacity to establish a fuller range of motion through free squatting, that's ultimately where we would like to see people get. But it's cool if we don't ever get there with a bar on our back. There are many different ways to train patterns without the dogma of a single loading tool. Usually it's the barbell. It's like, man, if I can't lift with the barbell anymore, like I'm just gonna go like sit on the couch, Netflix and chill and eat Cheetos instead. But there's always a different way to train the same pattern, same but different. And I think reestablishing that pattern is huge. But the squat, for whatever reason, there's a lot of mixed emotions about it. And I love squatting as much as anyone else, but I also see the benefit of split squatting. I see the benefit of Bulgarian split squats. I see the benefits of lunges, but it's just a different pattern in my mind. The way the neural developmental sequence works, these are two different distinct patterns: single leg lower body asymmetrical stance pattern versus a squat pattern. But squatting by no means needs to just be with the barbell. We start people with goblet box squats, we progress them from there, and we work to get strong across trying to get a full body recruitment pattern with the squat itself. And that alone, we can get a great training effect with a 50-pound dumbbell held in a goblet position with the right set, rep, and rest schemes with great execution. It's a matter of how do you utilize the tools that are appropriate for you at that point in time in your life, but also how do you train hard enough to, again, elicit the stimulus as we were talking about before.
Right. Two questions then before we wrap up and you run off to catch a plane. You talk about the butt and why we want to have a big butt. So it was an interesting thing. It certainly caught my attention. But why is a big butt important, and what is the best way to build it?
It makes you sexy. That's why. And that's today. That's the last number of years in our fitness industry and really across America. I think America are the pioneers of the big asses. And I'm proud of that. But as we have more big asses walking around, we learn more because there's more researchers that are going through focused on glute development, one of which is a good friend of mine. And we look at the hip specifically. Is the intermediary joint the biggest joint in the human body? Okay, cool. We know that. It's halfway between the lower body and the torso and the upper body. But the hip is protected and it is ingrained and intertwined with the mechanics of not only the pelvis, but also the lumbar spine and the spine in general. So we look at the biggest protecting mechanism, in my opinion, on the spine and on the pelvis and the hip structure and that entire complex as the biggest, thickest muscle in the body, which is the glutes. The glutes are the king because the glutes can not only get big, they can not only get strong, they can not only protect the spine and the hips, but they are metabolically very, very pleasing for people because bigger muscles mean stronger muscles. Bigger and stronger muscles mean that they burn more calories and they play a bigger role in systemic health. I could talk about the glutes forever, but the big thing that people get wrong today is that, yes, they want bigger glutes. They want stronger glutes. I'm talking about glutes every week on Instagram, but the ways in which they develop them are not usually right. There's multiple ways to develop any type of muscular region or movement pattern, but there's certain things that just don't work. Walking up the Stairmaster with the band around your knees for 45 minutes sideways is not the best way to build gluteal tissue. Other things, doing reps of 200 on dumbbell or cable kickbacks, that's not an appropriate way. The glutes are not this like new magical thing that defied the principles of exercise science and physiology. It's just another muscular region that needs to be trained appropriately. And what is appropriate? We look at having like a three-pronged approach to glute training. We look at heavy loading. That can be established with your squat or your hip hinge patterns or deadlifts, or it could be established with things like hip thrusts. And then we look at hypertrophy-based loading, which is maybe anywhere from about 8 to 15-ish rep ranges, hitting close to failure. And this is best suited with having intermediary planes of motion hit, meaning that we get the hip into extension, external rotation, a slight abduction. So multiple synergistic factors of actions of the glutes tend to help hypertrophy a lot. And then finally, we do isolation work. It does look like Instagram booty chick shit, but it does work if you put it into the program in the right time and places. Anywhere from about 15 to 50 reps. This is really along the lines of hip abduction, hip external rotation. And I usually don't have heavy loading with this. We don't lock into machines on this. These are usually band or body weight movements. But what most people are missing is the heavy loading through foundational movement patterns, and then the traditional quote unquote bodybuilding or hypertrophy work. You can't just go straight to the metabolic stress work and think that you're going to grow. Most likely you're going to end up with overuse injuries, and you're going to end up with a flabbier, flatter butt. And that is not the goal of glute training. But we look at my training systems, and something that I see when I go to a course and I see our attendees, I'm like, damn, these people have some strong looking posterior chains. And it's true. They got big butts, they got thick hamstrings, and their upper backs are very, very developed. And it's the reason because we establish volumes that are about a 3-to-1 ratio posterior to anterior. There's a lot more involved with that statement, but these pain-free performance ratios, it matters. And especially reestablishing the biggest, broadest, heaviest hitting musculature in the human body, you can't go wrong with developing your upper back, your glutes, or your hamstrings. That is going to be what keeps you upright when you're 80 years old. And those are the things that actually in our culture today are the most aesthetically pleasing. The funniest thing that I heard is bigger butts make you biologically more attractive across all species. And I was like, I can get behind that.
Get behind that. Okay, we won't go there. So final question then, John. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make it possible. What would be a memorable example of you escaping your own personal limits?
Yeah. Oh, man, that's a great question. Limits are what you place on yourself. And whether that's in your training, whether that's in your business or your life. And we are extraordinarily lucky to live in a country where the sky is the potential, have opportunities that some places in the world don't have. But many times we just run into self-limiting ourselves with these glass ceilings of what we think is possible. When I got into the fitness industry, I wanted to train athletes. And today I have such a fortunate opportunity to impact so many coaches and so many businesses and so many people across the world in such a positive way that I would have never thought this existed. But it wasn't easy. It continues to be the hardest thing that I've ever done day after day after day. COVID didn't help that at all. But it's something that at the end of the day, it's worth it because it's not only the destination, it's the journey in which you take. It's the people that you take this journey with. And ultimately, at the end of your career, or even at the end of your life, sounding a little bit more grim, what do you leave behind? My plan is to leave behind an exercise and a physicality model that has helped people and ultimately try to reverse some of the pain, injury, obesity rates, and preventable lifestyle diseases that are currently pigeonholing our health as a society. At the end of the day, being able to have the opportunity to do something like that, something that I never thought I'd have. And one of the most fortunate people in the world to have these opportunities and be on podcasts like this it's truly a pleasure.
Fantastic. Well, John, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed my time with you. I hope to get to meet you face to face at some point. I'll definitely be searching you out. And best of luck. I think you did a wonderful job, and best of luck of getting that message out to more people. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.